Jiagwich, Savannah is Anamdam. Hello, my name is Savannah. Today I'll be reading a story from the book called Animal Folk Tales of Britain and Ireland, and the author is Sharon Jacksties. And I know I've read a story from this book before, and that one was quite long, but this one is a short story called The Rooks in the Pear Trees. There once was a carter whose route took him past a hedge in which were growing some magnificent pear trees. It was spring, and they were so covered in foaming white blossom that it looked like 5 fountains had mysteriously appeared amongst the hawthorns. The humming of the bees was so loud that he couldn't hear his horse's hoofs. He passed that way again at the end of summer, and the boughs were hanging low with fruit. This time he couldn't hear the hoofs for the buzzing of the wasps and hornets that were feasting on the overripe fruit. Careful to avoid them, the carter chose a plump pear, then another, and yet another. He had never tasted anything so delicious, and wondered at them having been planted in a hedge in the middle of nowhere. Just then a farmer rode by, and the carter hailed him and asked about the trees. Although he seemed none too pleased at this inquiry, he directed him to a public house that lay slightly out of his way. I'm not the one to tell that story, but the landlord knows all about it. He was there. Ask him. It is a short road to a good drink and a shorter one to a good story. In no time, the carter was at the sign of the pear trees. He explained that a farmer had sent him to hear the story from the landlord's own lips. When he had heard a description of the farmer, that landlord allowed those lips a luxurious smirk before he began. That same farmer owned the best pear trees in the whole country, if not the county, if not the whole country. But you know what pears are like? A tricksy fruit. Hard as marbles one minute, and soon as you take your eyes off them, soft as whey the next. Trouble was that close to those trees there was a great rookery, and those rooks were also watching the pears. Try as he might, the farmer could never get to the ready-to-pick fruit before those rooks. Every year he would come over to tell me about what had happened and drown his sorrows with a few extra pints. He could tell how those birds descended like a silent black cloud. What enraged him as much as their thievery was that for this one occasion in the year they had the cunning to remain silent, the better to prolong their subterfuge. Course, even if he managed to scare them off mid-feast, the fruit would be damaged beyond saving. One year, I made a suggestion, and he took me up on it. He chose a day that he guessed was just before the pears ripening. He got a ladder and painted every twig and branch with sticky bird lime. The next day was extra warm, and the pears had ripened by noon. The expected black cloud descended, but finding themselves stuck fast, the rooks were not silent for long. The farmer rushed over to get his blunderbuss to take advantage of those sitting targets. When he appeared with it, those birds started flapping their wings harder than they ever had. But it wasn't in a kind of frenzied panic. It was more like they had been drilled on a parade ground. Flap, 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 all in time. With that concerted effort, didn't they all lift up into the air, tearing those pear trees out by the roots and burying them aloft? Farmer was too flabbergasted to take aim. His blunderbuss only went off by accident when he had sat down with his knees giving way at the shot. The birds were out of range by the time he could reload. Anyways, I was in here when I heard something tearing at my thatch. Couldn't make out what it might be, so I rushed out to see, just in time to see that great flock passing over. It was the roots of the pear trees dragging across my roof that I heard. Well, I admit that my knees nearly gave way at the surprise, too. When there was a mighty clap of thunder and a downpour, didn't that rain wash off all the bird lime? The rooks flew free, dropping those trees in my hedge. I own a few fields here and there where they took root from that day to this. Of course, I turn a blind eye if farmer ever comes scrumping, and now you know why he prefers not to tell this tale himself. And that is the end of the story of The Rooks in the Pear Trees.